The sea had always been feared, but never like this. Sailors spoke of storms, monsters, and whirlpools, yet none of their tales matched what was about to rise from the deep. For centuries, the oceans carried trade, warships, and the blood of battles, but they also carried secrets that no one believed were real. Humanity thought it ruled the surface of the world, but under the dark waves, something ancient waited. The first sign came quietly. Fishermen along the coast disappeared without leaving broken nets or boats behind. Villages awoke to the sound of screaming in the night, only to find homes at the shore torn apart by claws too sharp for any known beast. The tides shifted strangely, rising higher than maps had ever recorded. Many blamed storms, but no storm sang with voices that lured men into the water, never to return. In the great naval fleets, commanders dismissed the rumors until their ships began to vanish. A warship would sail into calm waters, and hours later only wreckage floated back. Survivors spoke of glowing eyes under the sea, of pale hands dragging soldiers into the depths, of songs that made even hardened men leap overboard willingly. At first, leaders called them mad. Then more ships were lost. Too many to deny. Something had a woken. Far out at sea, where the moonlight bent across black waters, a figure rose. Her scales shimmered with a light that seemed alive, emerald green and sapphire blue dancing in waves across her body. Her hair floated like fire beneath the water, and her eyes glowed with a strange, alien beauty. She was no myth. She was the proof of a race humanity had long forgotten. The mermaids had returned, but these were not harmless creatures from children's tales. They were warriors. Their tails glistened with armored scales harder than steel, and their voices carried power that could bend human will. For centuries, they had slept in the ruins of their drowned kingdoms, waiting for the moment the sea called them back. Now they rose together, not as scattered beings, but as an army. The awakening had begun, and it was not for peace. It was for survival and conquest. The first real battle came in the northern seas. A fleet of human ships sailed to defend a coastal city after reports of strange raids. The soldiers laughed nervously, still half believing it was a trick of fear. But when the waters erupted, laughter died. Dozens of mermaids surged out of the waves, their bodies moving faster than arrows. They dragged men into the ocean before swords could be raised. Spears carved from coral struck with the force of steel, piercing through armor. And at their center, a queen-like figure sang, her voice so powerful the very water seemed to rise at her command. Waves crashed against the ships, capsizing them one by one. For the first time in generations, human soldiers saw terror in its purest form. They fought with muskets and cannons, but their firepower scattered in panic. Cannonballs struck water but rarely found their targets, while mermaids darted with speed no human could match. Some soldiers tied themselves to the mast to resist the song's pull, but ropes snapped when waves tore the ships apart. Men screamed, not from wounds, but from the sound of that voice inside their heads, urging them to surrender. The sea itself seemed alive, and humanity realized it was losing. On the shore, the people of the city watched helplessly as fire lit the night. Ships burned, screams carried across the wind, and the water glowed faintly where blood mixed with the tide. The elders whispered of legends they had dismissed. Legends of an ancient pact broken long ago, when humans had driven mermaids from their shallow waters into the abyss. No one believed the old stories. Now they wished they had. The mermaids had not forgotten. They had not forgiven. And their return was not by chance, it was war. Among the chaos, one soldier stood out. He was not the strongest, nor the highest in rank. But while others panicked, he watched carefully. His name was Elias, a man who had grown up near the sea but never feared it. He noticed something others did not. The mermaids attacked fiercely, but their queen's song seemed to direct them, as if without her, they would scatter. He gripped his weapon tighter. If humanity was to survive, they would need to learn how to fight back, not only with steel and gunpowder, but with strategy against an enemy unlike any they had ever known. Night ended with broken ships sinking into the black waves. Survivors clung to driftwood, eyes wide with horror. The sea carried whispers of victory, voices that echoed like laughter. The mermaids had won their first battle, and humanity had lost its first war. But deep within the terror, a spark of resistance burned. Elias swore silently that this was not the end. The world had changed forever, and so had he. The survivors of the northern battle drifted ashore at dawn. Some were carried by waves, half dead and shaking from cold. Others crawled from the sea with eyes wide, their voices broken as they tried to explain what had happened. Word spread quickly. An army of mermaids had destroyed one of the largest fleets. No one wanted to believe it, but the wreckage washing up along the coast told the truth. Cannons bent like toys, armor ripped open as if made of paper, and the bodies of sailors with strange coral spears lodged in their chests. The sea no longer looked calm. Every ripple seemed like a warning dot in the capital city, leaders argued. Some called it superstition, claiming men had been driven mad by storms. Others demanded answers. The Queen's Council gathered in a hall built of stone and iron, its walls lined with maps of the known seas. Messengers rushed in carrying reports from coastal villages, fishermen gone, children stolen from shores, and even livestock dragged into the waves. At last, the truth could no longer be ignored. Humanity was at war, not with a nation, but with the sea itself. Elias was one of the survivors brought before the council. His clothes were torn, his face marked by salt and fire, but his eyes burned with determination. When questioned, he spoke clearly. He told them of the mermaids, their speed, their strength, and above all, the queen who commanded them with her song. Some in the hall scoffed, but the fear in his voice silenced others. If we do not understand their power, he warned, we will not last another season. They will drown us in our own harbors. The council fell into silence. Soldiers could fight men, but how could they fight an enemy that lived in the depths, unseen until it struck? Cannons and muskets were powerful, but they were useless against foes who vanished beneath the waves. It was not just a war of strength. It was a war of world's land against sea. Meanwhile, the mermaids gathered in their hidden city deep below. Their queen, Sirenia, sat upon a throne carved from black coral, her scales glowing faintly in the dim light. Around her, warriors sang in low tones, their voices weaving together in harmony. The awakening had spread to every corner of the ocean. From frozen waters to tropical reefs, her people were rising. For too long they had hidden in ruins, forced away by human ships and poisoned waters. Now they would reclaim what was once theirs. Sirenia's eyes burned with purpose. To her people, humans were destroyers. They cut the forests of the shore, spilled oil into the tides, and slaughtered without respect. They believe the world belongs to them, she said, her voice carrying through the chamber. But the sea is older than their kingdoms. We are the children of its heart. We will not bow. We will not hide. We will make them remember who rules the waters. Her army answered with a rising song that shook the very stones of the ocean floor. Thousands of voices joined together, filling the deep with power. Schools of fish darted away in fear, and whales turned from the sound. The mermaids were preparing for something greater than raids. They were preparing for conquest. Back on land, fear began to shape into resolve. Blacksmiths worked day and night, reforging weapons to pierce through coral armor. Engineers sketched strange designs, nets woven with steel, harpoons with ropes meant to drag enemies from the water. Priests prayed in temples, asking the heavens for strength. The people of the coast fortified their towns, building walls along the beaches as if stone could hold back the tide. But still, they feared the song. No wall could block the voice that slipped into men's minds, whispering promises of peace as it dragged them into the deep. Elias trained with the soldiers, but he also studied. He spoke with old sailors who remembered forgotten tales. He searched libraries for myths of sea creatures, looking for secrets buried in legends. At night, he stood at the shore, staring at the horizon, listening for the faint echo of voices on the wind. He felt that he was being prepared for something larger, though he could not yet see what it was. The thought of the queen haunted him, the way her power bent the sea itself, and the strange sorrow he thought he saw in her glowing eyes. Was she only a monster or something more? The second battle came sooner than anyone expected. This time, the mermaids struck a harbor at midday, when the sun was high and the people thought they were safe. Ships burned before they could leave the docks. Warriors rose from the water, dragging soldiers screaming into the sea. The city's bells rang out, warning of invasion, and the streets filled with chaos as people fled inland. But the defenders were ready. Nets dropped into the water, trapping some of the attackers. Cannons fired at point-blank range, shaking the air with thunder. For the first time, mermaids fell in numbers. The victory, however, was only partial. Though many mermaids were killed, the harbor was destroyed, and hundreds of humans died. The sea withdrew only when Sirenia herself sang, lifting the tide higher than any storm and pulling her people back into the waves. The humans cheered when it ended, but Elias did not. He knew this was only the beginning. The awakening was not stopping, it was spreading. The harbor still smoked days after the battle. Broken ships lay tilted in the shallow water, their masts cracked like bones. The smell of fire mixed with salt hung in the air, and the cries of widows filled the streets. Humanity had survived this second attack, but the cost was heavy. The council called it a victory, but the people did not feel victorious. They felt hunted. Elias walked through the ruined docks, his boots crunching against shattered planks. He saw children searching for their fathers, mothers clinging to soldiers returning with empty eyes. The sea rolled quietly beyond the ruins, calm as if nothing had happened. That calm made Elias uneasy. He knew it was only the silence between storms. The council summoned him again. This time, they listened more closely. "You have seen them up close," the commander said. "What weakness do they have? How do we fight them?" Elias hesitated. He remembered the queen's song, how it had nearly bent his will. He remembered her glowing eyes, full of power and something else he couldn't name. "They are strong," he said finally, "but they are not endless. Without their queen, their attacks lose order. She's the heart of their army." His words settled heavily in the room. The counselors exchanged glances. If that was true, then the war was not just against the mermaids, it was against her. Far beneath the waves. Sirenia also thought of the battle. She sat in her throne room, surrounded by her warriors. Their voices were calm, but she could feel their unease. Too many had fallen to human weapons. The steel nets and cannons had claimed lives, and her people had not expected humans to adapt so quickly. She knew they would grow stronger with each battle. That was humanity's gift and their curse. They learned. They endured. They always came back. For the first time since awakening, she wondered if the war would be as easy as she believed, yet she could not turn back. The sea itself had called her people. They had suffered for centuries, driven into darkness while humans ruled the coasts. Their cities had crumbled, their children had hidden in fear. Now, with every voice united, she could not ask them to return to hiding. She lifted her gaze, her scales glowing in the dim light. "We will strike again," she told her warriors. "But not blindly. We will break their leaders, not just their walls." In the capital, plans took shape. Blacksmiths forged heavier harpoons. Engineers built floating barriers of steel. Messengers carried orders to every coastal city. Guard the harbors, prepare the cannons, train the soldiers. The land was bracing itself for a long war. But Elias knew it was not enough. He believed no wall of stone or steel could win unless they understood their enemy. He pushed for something bold. "Let me go," he said to the council. "Let me find where they rise from. If we know their home, we can end this before it consumes us." The council hesitated. Sending a man into the sea's grip sounded like madness. Yet desperation made them listen. That night, Elias stood at the shoreline with a small crew. They had built a vessel different from others, low, fast, with reinforced sides and nets ready. The moon shone across the waves, and the water glimmered faintly as if alive. As the ship set out, he felt both fear and determination. Somewhere out there, beneath the surface, the queen waited. He did not know if he would face her as an enemy or something more. The voyage was silent at first. The sea stretched endlessly, dark and deep. The crew whispered of strange shapes moving below, of shadows too large for any fish. On the second night, the singing began. At first faint, like wind, then stronger, rising from the deep. The men clutched their ears, their faces pale. Some gripped the rail as if ready to leap overboard. Elias forced himself to stay steady. He tied ropes around his men, shouting above the sound, anchoring them to the ship. The song grew sharper, like blades cutting into thought. Then the water stirred, glowing faintly. They had been found. Mermaids rose around the ship, their eyes bright in the moonlight. They circled swiftly, their tails slicing the water. Spears lifted in their hands, and the crew froze in terror. Then, from the center, Sirenia herself appeared. Her beauty was unearthly, her presence commanding. She did not strike at once. Instead, she raised her hand, and the singing fell silent. Her gaze locked on Elias, and for a moment, the world seemed to stop. "Why do you come into my waters?" Her voice echoed, both spoken and sung. The crew trembled, but Elias stepped forward, gripping the rail. "Because if this war continues, both our peoples will drown." The queen's eyes narrowed. She had expected fear, pleading, or hatred. But his words carried something else, resolve. He did not speak like prey. He spoke like an equal. Around them, the sea calmed, though her warriors held their spears ready. Sirenia studied him in silence, and Elias felt a strange pull, not the forced lure of her song, but something deeper. Perhaps, he thought, the war was not only about weapons. Perhaps it was about voices that had never been heard. The night closed around them, heavy with tension. Neither side moved. The fate of both worlds hung in that stillness, between a human who dared to speak and a queen who had sworn to conquer. Asterisk. The sea was so still that every ripple felt like it carried meaning. The crew held their breath, terrified, while Elias stood facing the mermaid queen. Her glowing eyes never left him, sharp as blades yet filled with something he could not fully understand. Around her, dozens of warriors floated in a circle, their spears pointed at his ship. If she gave the order, they would tear the vessel apart in seconds. But she had not spoken again. She was waiting. Testing him, Elias' heart pounded, but he forced his voice steady. "This war destroys us both. Your people die in our harbors. My people drown in your waters. If we keep fighting, the sea will be filled with nothing but blood." His words carried across the waves, simple and direct. Some of his men whispered for him to stop, afraid he was angering her. But Sirenia only tilted her head, as if weighing his truth. "You speak as though you understand our pain," she said, her voice like a song woven with steel. "But where were your kind when we were hunted? When our children were driven from the reefs? When your fires poisoned the waters?" Her words struck hard, and Elias could not deny them. Humanity had harmed the sea for centuries. He lowered his gaze for a moment, then lifted it again. "I cannot change the past, but I can face you now. Not with lies, not with weapons, only with truth. If you destroy us, you will inherit a ruined world. If you let me speak, perhaps we can find another path." A murmur rippled through the mermaids. Some hissed angrily, but others fell quiet. Sirenia raised her hand, silencing them. Her eyes studied him as if she could see deeper than flesh, searching his heart. At last she swam closer, her tail glimmering in the moonlight. The crew stumbled back, but Elias stood firm. She stopped only a few feet away, close enough that he could see the fine shimmer of her scales and the faint sadness behind her beauty. "You are bold," she said softly. "Perhaps too bold for your own life." Then, without warning, the sea surged. A massive wave rose, lifting the ship high. Men screamed, clinging to ropes. The mermaids vanished beneath the water, their queen with them. For a moment, Elias thought it was over, that they would be sunk. But the wave did not strike. It lowered them back onto the sea gently, almost as if it had been a warning. The waters stilled, leaving the ship trembling but afloat. Elias knew then that the queen had spared them. She had listened. For now. When they returned to the capital, the council was divided. Some saw Elias' survival as proof of his bravery. Others called it weakness, accusing him of speaking with the enemy instead of killing her. "You had a chance to strike," one commander shouted. "One shot, one blade, and their queen would be dead." Elias met his anger calmly. "And then what?" "Her army would drown us before morning. You do not understand her power. Killing her in haste would end us all." His words did not win him many friends, but they planted doubt. Perhaps brute force was not the only way. Meanwhile, Sirenia returned to her hidden city. Her people gathered eagerly, expecting tales of another victory. Instead, she spoke of the human who had stood against her without trembling. Some mocked him as foolish, others raged that she had not killed him. But her advisors noticed something different in her voice, a trace of uncertainty, rare for their queen. In her heart, Sirenia remembered Elias' eyes, steady even against her song. For the first time, she wondered if war was the only path. But her people's cries for vengeance were loud, and she could not ignore them. The next weeks were filled with uneasy silence. No attacks came from the sea, no fleets sailed into battle. It was as if both sides were holding their breath. But beneath that silence, preparations continued. The humans built stronger defenses, even experimenting with sound devices meant to block the mermaids' songs. The mermaids gathered allies from across the oceans, calling creatures of the deep to their side. Sharks, whales, and stranger things began to follow their armies, answering Sirenia's call. The balance was shifting, and the pause felt like the calm before a storm. Elias trained harder than ever, yet his thoughts were troubled. At night, he dreamed of the queen's voice, not as a weapon, but as something haunting and sorrowful. He could not explain why it stayed with him. He told himself she was the enemy, yet part of him believed she wanted more than blood. That belief was dangerous, but it refused to leave his heart. The storm broke at last when a great fleet sailed from the capital, determined to strike first. Dozens of warships filled the horizon, their sails black against the sky. The commanders had grown tired of waiting. They wanted to crush the mermaids in their home waters and end the threat once and for all. Elias was ordered to join them, though he argued it was reckless. "You do not know what waits in the deep," he warned. "You are walking into their world," but no one listened. The pride of men outweighed their fear. As the fleet pushed into the open ocean, the water seemed too calm, too quiet. Elias stood at the bow, his hand gripping his sword, his eyes on the horizon. Deep below, Sirenia prepared her warriors, her voice weaving through the currents. The awakening had come to its peak. Soon, sea and land would clash in a battle that would decide who ruled the world. The fleet moved across the sea like a wall of steel and wood. Dozens of warships sailed in tight formation, their black sails heavy against the sky. Cannons lined the decks, ready to thunder at the first sign of movement. Soldiers filled the ships, armor clanking, muskets loaded, eyes fixed on the endless horizon. To many, it felt like humanity's greatest strength. To Elias, it felt like walking straight into the jaws of the ocean. The wind was sharp, carrying the scent of salt and iron. The commanders barked orders, their voices filled with pride. Today we end this war. Today we reclaim the sea. But beneath their shouting, fear lingered. Every man remembered the stories, the glowing eyes, the song that broke minds, the hands that dragged soldiers into the depths. Pride could not erase memory. As night fell, the sea turned black and still. The stars shone above, but beneath the waves was nothing but shadow. Elias stood at the bow, watching, waiting. His instincts told him the silence was wrong. The ocean was too calm, as if it waited for something. Then it came. A faint glow beneath the water, moving swiftly, spreading until the sea itself shimmered with eerie light. The men tensed. Elias whispered, "They're here." The first strike was sudden. A warship on the left side exploded upward, split apart as a massive wave rose beneath it. Men screamed as they were thrown into the air, only to vanish into the glowing depths. Before cannons could fire, the water erupted everywhere. Mermaids surged from below, hundreds of them, their scales reflecting the moonlight like living armor. Their spears flashed, their tails cutting through wood, their voices rising into a terrible harmony. The song swept across the fleet, and men clutched their heads, staggering as the melody invaded their minds. Some dropped their weapons. Others leapt overboard as if called by a lover's voice. Cannons roared in reply. The sea lit up with fire and thunder as iron balls crashed into the waves, shattering coral shields and tearing through ranks of mermaids. Nets dropped from the decks, dragging some into captivity. Blood spread through the water, human and mermaid alike. The battle raged in chaos, no longer a line of ships but a storm of destruction. Fire burned on the surface while shadows moved below, striking unseen. At the center of it all was Serenia. Her voice carried above the rest, stronger, sharper, bending the sea itself. Waves rose at her command, smashing ships together, tearing sails from masts. Around her, her strongest warriors fought with fury, driving back humans who dared stand. Yet even in her triumph, she felt the weight of loss. Her people fell in numbers too great to ignore. For every ship they sank, dozens of mermaids did not rise again. Elias forced himself to resist the song. He tied ropes to his men again, dragging them back when they staggered toward the rails. His musket fired until it was useless, then he drew his blade. He fought not just against enemies, but against the pull in his own mind. Still, he saw the truth. Without Serenia's voice, the battle would scatter. All strength flowed from her. As he cut through chaos, he saw her. Serenia stood upon a crest of water, her scales glowing brighter than ever, her voice lifting the tide. Around her, men fell silent, entranced, their weapons slipping from their hands. Elias gritted his teeth and charged, his heart pounding. He knew this moment mattered. Either he reached her, or the fleet was lost. The sea rose against him, pushing him back. Mermaids darted to block his path, but he fought like a man possessed. His sword clashed against coral, his arm burned with cuts, but he kept moving. The song pressed into his skull, whispering for him to surrender, to let go, to sink into peace. He roared in defiance, forcing his body forward. His voice, raw and human, cut through her melody for an instant. Serenia's eyes widened as he broke free of her power. For the first time, her song failed. Their eyes locked across the chaos, hers glowing with shock, his blazing with resolve. In that heartbeat, the battle froze around them. Mermaids hesitated. Soldiers paused. The queen and the human stood face to face, their wills colliding harder than any weapon. Then the wave collapsed. Elias was thrown back onto the deck as water crashed across the ship. Serenia vanished beneath the foam, her song cut short. The battle continued in fury, but something had changed. The mermaids fought less like an army, more like scattered hunters. Without her voice, they could not hold formation. Ships rallied, cannons struck harder, and the tide of the fight shifted. By dawn, the sea was filled with wreckage. Bodies floated everywhere, human and mermaid together. Dozens of ships were lost, but some survived, and the fleet still stood. The mermaids had withdrawn, their queen unseen. For the first time, humanity had not been crushed. For the first time, they had forced the enemy to retreat, but Elias did not celebrate. He stood among the ruins, his sword dripping with salt and blood, staring at the horizon. He knew she had not been defeated, only shaken. Serenia had felt his defiance, and he had seen her hesitation. Something deeper connected them now, something that frightened him more than death. The war was not over. The real struggle was just beginning. The sea was quiet again, but it was no peace. Smoke still lingered over the waves where ships had burned. Survivors patched sails and pulled bodies from the water. The fleet had not been destroyed, but it had not won either. Too many lives were gone, and the ocean still belonged to the mermaids. Soldiers cheered faintly, calling it a victory, but Elias could not join them. He knew the queen had only withdrawn. This war was not measured in ships, but in will. And neither side had broken yet. When the fleet returned to the capital, the council roared with divided voices. Some demanded another strike, insisting the enemy had weakened. Others wanted to seal the coasts and hide behind walls. Fear and anger grew louder than reason. Elias stood before them again, exhausted, scarred, but unbent. "You call this victory," he said, his voice rough. "But what did we win? A sea full of dead? Ships that will never sail again? If we keep fighting, there will be nothing left for either of us." His words silenced some, enraged others. Yet in their hearts, many knew he was right. Far beneath the waves, Serenia drifted alone in the ruins of her city. Her people mourned, their voices low and sorrowful. Too many warriors had not returned. The ocean, once alive with songs of triumph, was heavy with grief. She had led them with the promise of freedom, but now she questioned if she had only led them into endless war. In her mind, the image of Elias would not leave. His defiance had broken her song, something no human had ever done. He had stood against her not with hatred, but with truth. And truth struck deeper than any blade. Days passed, and both sides prepared for the next battle. But the world itself began to suffer. The seas grew restless, storms striking harder than before. Fish vanished from coasts, leaving hunger in villages. Even the mermaids felt the strain, their children weaker, their shelters breaking under violent currents. It was as if the ocean itself rejected the war. Some called it a curse. Others whispered that the sea goddess, the mother of all tides, was angry. Whatever the reason, both races were being torn apart by their own struggle. Elias could not watch it continue. Against orders, he took a small boat into the night, sailing alone toward the waters where he had last seen Serenia. His men begged him not to go, warning it was suicide, but he did not waver. If he failed, the war would consume everything. If he succeeded, perhaps something greater could rise from the ruins. As the moon lit the waves, he stood tall, calling into the night. "Serenia, Queen of the Deep, hear me." His voice echoed, lost in the wind. For a long time nothing answered. Then the water stirred. She rose slowly from the depths, her eyes glowing faintly in the silver light. She looked weary, her beauty shadowed by sorrow, yet her presence was still commanding. Around her, no army waited. She had come alone. For a moment, neither spoke. The sea rolled gently between them, carrying silence heavier than any words. At last Elias broke it. "This must end," he said. "If we fight again, both our peoples will fall. The sea itself will bury us." Serenia's gaze searched his face, as if testing his heart once more. "Why should I trust you?" she asked. "Your kind has broken every promise made to the sea." Elias stepped forward, his hands empty of weapons. because I have nothing left to gain but truth. I am not a king, not a counselor. I am only a man who has seen enough death to know it cannot be our future. If we share this world, then let us share it. Land and sea, not as enemies, but as guardians together. His voice carried across the water, firm and steady. For a long time, Sirenia said nothing. The waves shifted softly around her, her eyes glowing as if a storm raged within. Then, slowly, her expression changed. The sharpness faded, replaced by something gentler, something almost human. You speak as if the sea could forgive, she whispered. Perhaps it can, but not through words alone. Through action. She lifted her hand, and the water glowed faintly. If your people will honor the sea, we will honor the land. If they break this vow, the ocean will rise again, and nothing will stop it. Elias nodded, his heart pounding. Then let this be the first vow kept, not broken. The two stood across the waves, bound not by sword or song, but by choice. In that moment, the war shifted. No peace treaty was signed, no great battle was won, but something greater happened, a beginning. Sirenia returned to her people with new orders. No more raids, no more songs of war. Elias returned to his with a promise, to fight not against the sea, but beside it. Both sides were wary, both scarred, but hope flickered for the first time since the awakening. Years later, people would speak of the war between land and sea. They would remember the terror of the mermaids and the courage of humans. But most of all, they would remember the night when a queen of the deep and a soldier of the shore faced each other and chose survival together. Not through conquest, but through understanding. The awakening of the mermaids had begun as a call to war. It ended as the first step toward a fragile, precious peace.